The Ark of the Covenant was not stolen, it was not destroyed, it was not captured by Babylon, it is not in Ethiopia. Yahweh himself withdrew it, and he announced it 600 years earlier through the mouth of Jeremiah in a verse that almost no one preaches. This video is going to show you exactly why it disappeared, and what replaced it is going to forever change what you believe about the presence of God. We begin. The most sacred object in all the history of Israel, the chest of acacia wood covered with pure gold, where the presence of Yahweh dwelt, the earthly throne of the God of the universe. And one day, simply, it stopped being there. There is not a single page in all the Bible where someone says, "And King so-and-so stole the ark." There is not a single Babylonian chronicle that lists it among the spoils of the temple. There is not a single scribe who documents its capture, its destruction, its burial, or its rescue. Here goes the fact that almost no one told you in church. When Jesus was born, the ark had already been gone for centuries. When the Magi visited the child in his house, the Holy of Holies of Herod's temple was completely empty. No ark, no golden cherubim, no tablet of the law. Only a bare stone on the floor where the glory once rested. And that is exactly what you are going to understand in the next few minutes. Why Yahweh removed the ark. Why he planned it in 3 consecutive blows over 4 centuries. And why Jesus was born into a world where the center of Jewish worship had been emptied on purpose. Because what replaced the ark absolutely changed everything that it means to approach God. We are going to do something different in this video. We are going to start at the end, year 70 of our era. Month of August, suffocating heat over the hills of Judea. Roman troops commanded by General Titus enter Jerusalem after 5 months of brutal siege. The city is unrecognizable. The famine had reached levels that the historian Flavius Josephus describes as appalling in his work The War of the Jews, Book 6. Mothers devoured their children. The corpses piled up in the streets. The smell of death mixed with smoke and dust was so dense that the Roman soldiers vomited as they advanced. Josephus, who was present on the Roman side as a translator and witness, wrote enormous mortality figures for the siege. Tacitus spoke of 600,000 besieged. Modern historians dispute the numbers, but the human horror of the event is confirmed in multiple independent sources. What is indisputable is that the survivors would be sold as slaves in the markets of Egypt and Rome. And then Titus orders something that no Roman general had ever done before against a temple dedicated to a single god. Something that went against the usual Roman policy of respecting foreign sanctuaries. He orders the total destruction of Herod's temple. The flames rise, the white marble stones blacken. The gold that covered the walls of the sanctuary, gold enough to build an empire, begins to melt and seep through the cracks of the stone. And here something happens that Josephus himself recounts. Roman soldiers, seeing that the gold was seeping under the foundations, began to dig literally stone by stone. This would later explain why Jesus had prophesied, according to Matthew 24 verse 2, that not one stone would be left on another. While some dig looking for the gold, others enter the sanctuary. They cross the outer courtyard. They cross the courtyard of the women with its white columns still intact in some areas. They pass the courtyard of Israel, where only Jewish men could enter. They climb the steps of the sanctuary. They enter the holy place where the 7-branched golden lampstand was, the table of the bread of the presence, and the altar of incense from which perfumed smoke was still rising, mixing with the smoke of the war. The soldiers stop in front of something. A veil, a monstrous curtain, woven with blue, purple, and scarlet threads on fine linen. It has cherubim embroidered on it. They tear it down. They enter the Holy of Holies. And there inside, in the geographic and spiritual heart of the temple, in the place where Yahweh had promised to dwell, in the most sacred space of Judaism, in the room where supposedly the most sacred chest in the world was, they find nothing. There is no ark. There are no golden cherubim. There is no tablet of the law. There is no golden vessel with manna. There is no rod of Aaron that budded, only a stone, smooth, empty, silent. That stone still exists today. It is in the center of the Dome of the Rock, that Islamic building with the golden dome that you see when someone films Jerusalem from above. That smooth stone, exposed with no object on top, is exactly where for centuries the Ark of the Covenant rested. And the question almost no one asks is this: how did we get there? How did the most sacred object of the people of God go from being the absolute center of the nation to not being recorded anywhere when the Romans arrived? To understand that, we have to rewind 1,000 years. And you are going to discover that the disappearance of the Ark was not a single event. It was 3 blows, 3 stages, 3 moments calculated with a precision that has no human explanation. If this is already blowing your mind, I'm asking you a favor before continuing. Give the video a like. And if you are part of this family, you already know, leave me the little like out of trust. That helps a lot for the channel to keep growing. If you just arrived, you do not need to do anything yet. Wait, we are going to get to much stronger things. First blow, year 1400 before Christ, approximately. Let us go to the desert of Sinai. Moses has just received the tablets of the law on the mountain, and Yahweh gives him exact instructions to build a chest. The dimensions are in Exodus 25. 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, 1.5 cubits high, more or less 1 meter 25 by 75 by 75 centimeters. Acacia wood, coating of pure gold inside and outside, a crown of gold around it, 4 rings of gold cast in its corners to pass the poles that would allow it to be transported. The poles also of acacia covered with gold, and they were never to be removed from the rings. Never. On top, a lid of solid gold called the mercy seat, and at the ends of the mercy seat, 2 cherubim also of solid gold, looking at each other with their wings extended forward. And there, exactly between the wings of those 2 cherubim on the mercy seat, there dwelt the visible presence of Yahweh, not metaphorically, literally, the cloud by day, the fire by night, the voice that spoke to Moses, the glory that filled the tabernacle when Aaron offered sacrifice. All of that emanated from that exact point between the cherubim. The ark was the earthly throne of the God who created the universe. It was the material anchor of his presence. And from that moment, the ark began to travel. It crossed the Jordan, opening the waters. It went around Jericho 7 times and the walls fell. It was in Shiloh for almost 4 centuries. According to rabbinic tradition, some 369 years in the sanctuary where the priest Eli served in his last phase, until the Philistines captured it. And here something happens that almost no one tells. The priest Eli, already old, is sitting on a bench at the entrance of the sanctuary. A messenger arrives running from the battle, his face covered with dust, his clothes torn, and he shouts the news to him. Israel has been defeated, his 2 sons are dead, and the Ark of God was captured. When Eli hears the word ark, he falls backwards, breaks his neck, and dies. His pregnant daughter-in-law immediately goes into labor. Before dying, she gives birth to a son and names him Ichabod, which means the glory has departed. And that is what she said according to 1 Samuel 4, verse 21. The glory has departed from Israel. But the Philistines could not keep it. Where they put it, disasters occurred. The statue of their god Dagon appeared broken on the floor 2 in a row. The inhabitants of the cities began to die. The chronicles of 1 Samuel 5 describe tumors that appeared on the skin and plagues of mice that devastated the fields. After 7 months, they returned it on a cart pulled by 2 cows, without a human guide, tied with their calves shut in. The cows, against their natural instinct of staying with their calves, went straight to Israelite territory, bellowing in pain. The ark returned. But David's first attempt to bring it to Jerusalem ended in tragedy. And here something happens that deserves to be told well. David had gathered 30,000 chosen men. Music, joy, dance, instruments. They loaded the ark on a new cart pulled by oxen. A man named Uzzah, son of Abinadab, walked beside the cart, accompanied by his brother Ahio. They were on the road, crossing the threshing floor of a farmer named Nachon, when one of the oxen stumbled. The ark tilted. Uzzah, in an instinctive movement, reached out his hand and touched the chest to prevent it from falling, and he fell dead on the spot. 2 Samuel 6 verse 7 says that the wrath of Yahweh was kindled against Uzzah, and right there he struck him for that boldness. David was filled with dread, so much dread that he did not want to continue bringing the ark to Jerusalem. He left it at the house of a man named Obed-Edom the Gittite for 3 months. 3 months during which Yahweh blessed Obed-Edom and all his house. Only when David heard this did he recover his courage and went back for the ark. But this time the priests and Levites carried it, not on a cart, but on their shoulders, exactly as Yahweh had ordered in Numbers 4. And David danced with such intensity before the ark that his wife Michal, daughter of King Saul, despised him in her heart upon seeing him leap like a madman, dressed only in a linen ephod. Solomon built the temple, and on the day of the dedication, when the priests finally deposited the ark in the Holy of Holies under the wings of the enormous cherubim of olive wood covered with gold that Solomon had ordered made, something extraordinary occurred. 1 Kings 8 verse 10 records it. When the priests came out of the sanctuary, a cloud filled the house of Yahweh, and the priests could not continue officiating, because the glory of Yahweh had filled the temple with such intensity that it was impossible to remain there. Solomon falls to his knees, raises his arms to heaven, and with broken voice pronounces a prayer that is in 1 Kings 8 from verse 22 to 53. A prayer that ends with a question that is going to mark all the rest of this story. But is it true that God will dwell on the earth? Behold, the heavens of the heavens cannot contain you. How much less this house that I have built, Solomon knew. In the most glorious moment of Israel, when the cloud filled the temple and the presence of Yahweh descended upon the ark, the wisest king in history already intuited that this was barely an echo of something greater, that chest could not contain God, and Yahweh himself was going to stop dwelling there, forever, as everyone thought. But then, barely 5 years after the death of Solomon, came the first blow, year 925 before Christ. Reigning in Israel was King Rehoboam, son of Solomon, a weak king who had inherited a kingdom divided by his own arrogance. 5 years before, the 12 elders of Israel had met with him and had asked him to lighten the tax burden that his father had placed. Rehoboam, despising the counsel of the wise elders and following the counsel of the youths who had grown up with him, had responded with words that would shatter the kingdom. My father loaded you with a heavy yoke, but I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. 10 tribes rebelled. Only Judah and part of Benjamin stayed with the Davidic dynasty. And from the south, sensing the weakness, came a pharaoh. His name was Shishak. In the Egyptian inscriptions he appears as Sheshonk I, founder of the 22nd dynasty of Egypt, of Libyan origin. And this fact is not theology, it is pure and hard archaeology. In the temple of Karnak in Egypt, there is an immense wall called the Bubastite portal, also known as the Sheshonk portal, and on that wall Shishak ordered carved the list of the cities he conquered in his campaign through Canaan, originally around 175 names, of which some 127 can be read today. That inscription still exists. Anyone can go to see it. It has been catalogued and translated since the 19th century by the Egyptologist Jean-François Champollion, the same one who deciphered the hieroglyphs. And the inscription confirms exactly what 1 Kings 14 verse 26 says. Shishak entered Jerusalem. He sacked the temple of the Lord and the king's house. He took everything. He even took the gold shields that Solomon had made. Imagine the scene. The Egyptian troops crossing the gates of the city, the war chariots with their creaking wheels and whips, the Pharaoh at the head, dressed with the double crown of Egypt. Rehoboam coming out to receive him, not with an army, but with tribute, silver, gold, anything that could save the city from destruction, and the Egyptian soldiers entering the temple, crossing the courtyard, carrying Solomon's gold shields, the sacred utensils, the cups of the sacrifices. Rehoboam, humiliated, ordered bronze shields made to replace the gold ones. Bronze instead of gold, an exact metaphor of what Israel had become. And every time the king went to the temple, the guards would take out those bronze shields and put them back. An imitation, a shadow of lost glory. But here comes the detail that the immense majority overlooks. The biblical text says that Shishak took everything. But later, when the following reigns are described, the ark still appears. In 2 Chronicles 35, during the reign of King Josiah, almost 300 years later, the king orders that the Levites put the Holy Ark in the house of the temple. The exact phrase says, "Put the Holy Ark in the house that Solomon built." Why would they have to put it back if it had never been gone? Because something had happened. Something that the text does not detail, but can be reconstructed. One of the most solid theories in biblical archaeology, defended among others by the Israeli academic Israel Finkelstein and by Eric Klein in his analysis of Solomon's temple, is that during the sacking of Shishak, the ark was probably hidden by the priests in one of the underground passages of the Temple Mount. There are rabbinic records in the Talmud, in the tractate Yoma, that mention tunnels under the Holy of Holies precisely to protect sacred objects from invasions. There is even a medieval rabbinic tradition, cited by the Rabbi Maimonides in his work Mishneh Torah of the 12th century, that maintains that King Solomon, knowing prophetically that the temple would be destroyed, had ordered the construction of a secret system of underground vaults precisely to hide the ark when the moment came. This theory has an impressive echo in modern archaeology. The excavations of the Western Wall Tunnel, directed for decades by the Israeli archaeologist Dan Bahat, have revealed a complex system of passages that run under and beside the Temple Mount. Some of those passages are older than the Second Temple. Some could date back to the First Temple. The Pharaoh took the gold. The ark, hidden underground, survived. But something had changed forever. For the first time since the desert, the ark had been hidden. For the first time it had been outside the Holy of Holies, and although it returned under a shadow. The shadow that chest, which seemed untouchable, could be touched. And between Shishak and Josiah, there is something else that the biblical text only lets us glimpse. The intermediate reigns, especially those of the idolatrous kings like Ahaz, Manasseh, and Ammon, transformed the temple. Ahaz replaced Solomon's bronze altar with a replica of a pagan altar he had seen in Damascus. Manasseh placed an image of Asherah inside the temple. Ammon followed the trend. What happened to the ark during those perverse reigns? The biblical text does not say, but the mention of Josiah ordering it put back indicates that during the previous reigns it had been removed, probably to protect the sacred chest from the corrupt environment that filled the sanctuary, or because the idolatrous kings simply did not want it near. If this is leaving your head spinning, Give it a like right now. I am asking you seriously. It is the only way this channel has of continuing to reach more people with these things. Second blow. 300 years later. Reigning in Judah was King Josiah. Year 620 before Christ, approximately. A young, devout, reforming king, the last great king of David's dynasty before the disaster. He was barely 8 years old when he ascended to the throne after the assassination of his father Ammon. His people had been submerged in idolatry during the previous reign of his grandfather Manasseh, who had ruled 55 years, the longest and most perverse reign in the history of Judah. He had placed altars to Baal and poles of Asherah inside the temple of Yahweh. He had sacrificed his own children in the valley of Hinnom. He had practiced divination and consulted mediums. And Josiah did something that no king had done since Solomon. He ordered the temple cleansed. They removed all the idolatry that previous kings had brought in. Idols of Baal, poles of Asherah, horses of the sun that were at the entrance of the temple, dedicated to the Assyrian solar cult. Everything out, everything burned in the valley of Kidron, and during that cleansing, something unexpected occurs. The high priest Hilkiah is supervising the works. Stones are moved, forgotten rooms are emptied, and among the rubble and the dust of generations, they find a scroll, an ancient scroll, dusty, with semi-blurred writing. Hilkiah unrolls it, reads it, and his face turns white. He calls Shaphan, the royal scribe. I have found the book of the law in the house of Yahweh. Some academics believe it was a copy of Deuteronomy, possibly hidden during the reign of Manasseh, when even possessing a text of the Torah could cost one's life. Others believe it was the original scroll given by Moses and kept beside the ark, as Deuteronomy 31 verse 26 orders. Shaphan takes the scroll to the king, reads it before him, and when Josiah hears the curses that would fall upon Israel if it abandoned the covenant, the exact words that Yahweh had said through the mouth of Moses, the king tears his garments, weeps, tears his clothes again, because he understands. He understands how far the people had fallen. He understands that the announced judgment was already in motion. And then he did something extraordinary. He ordered the ark brought. The phrase is in 2 Chronicles 35 verse 3. Josiah tells the Levites, "Put the holy ark in the house that Solomon son of David, king of Israel, built. You will no longer have to carry it on your shoulders. Now serve Yahweh your God." Here, there is a key word. You will no longer have to carry it. Carry it where? From where were they carrying it? The ark, during the previous idolatrous reigns, had been removed from the temple. It had been hidden or moving, and Josiah returned it. But the return lasted barely 13 years. Because in 607 before Christ, Josiah died in battle against the pharaoh Necho at Megiddo, and with his death, Judah entered the final countdown. In 606, first Babylonian invasion, Nebuchadnezzar arrives and takes a group of young nobles, among whom is Daniel. In 597, second invasion. He takes King Jehoiakim, the nobility, the officials, and a priest named Ezekiel. And in 586, third invasion, the definitive one. Here, something happens that you are going to want to listen to with much attention, because what is about to come is the central piece of this entire story. The prophet Jeremiah is in Jerusalem. He is about 60 years old. Wrinkled hands, white beard, sunken eyes from the tears he has shed during 4 decades prophesying exactly what is about to occur, and no one has listened to him. They put him in a cistern full of mud where he sank up to his thighs in chapter 38 of his book. They beat him in the room of a scribe named Jonathan. They imprisoned him several times. They called him a traitor for announcing that Jerusalem would fall. They called him a Babylonian spy. They called him a deserter, But Jeremiah continues, limping among the streets full of screams, walking among the false altars that still remained hidden, weeping, according to the book of Lamentations, to the point that his tears were rivers. And while all that happens, Jeremiah writes something in chapter 3 of his book. It is a text about which we are going to talk in detail, but for now, we are going to save the exact phrase for later, because it is going to be the anchor of this entire video. What we can say now is that Jeremiah knew. He knew that Babylon was coming. He knew that the temple was going to be destroyed. He knew that Yahweh had handed the temple over to destruction. He knew that the glory that rested on the ark was already withdrawing. And then something occurs that is not in the Hebrew Bible, but is in an ancient Jewish source. It is in 2 Maccabees, chapter 2, verses 4 to 8. 2 Maccabees is not in the Protestant Bible. It is in the Catholic and the Orthodox Bibles and is considered a deuterocanonical book. But even for Protestants, the text has historical value and records a pre-Christian Jewish tradition that was widely known. That means it circulated before Christ. It was common heritage of Second Temple Judaism. The text says like this: "It is a letter supposedly written by Jewish priests in Egypt to their brothers in Jerusalem around the year 124 before Christ. And it narrates a tradition. It tells that the prophet Jeremiah, warned by God through an oracle, ordered that the tent and the ark follow him, and that he went up to the mountain where Moses had contemplated the inheritance of God. And upon arriving, Jeremiah, he found a cavern in the form of a room, and there he deposited the tent, the ark, and the altar of incense, and he sealed the entrance. The mountain where Moses had seen the promised land is Mount Nebo, in the present-day Kingdom of Jordan, opposite the eastern bank of the River Jordan. If you go up to the summit of Nebo, even today you can see in the distance the outlines of Jericho, the mountains of Judea, and on clear days, even the reflections of the Dead Sea. Imagine the scene. An old prophet, accompanied by loyal priests escaping from Jerusalem shortly before the fall, carrying the ark covered with cloths on their shoulders, crossing the Jordan to the north where the Babylonians had not yet arrived, climbing Nebo at slow pace, hidden among rocks and scrubland, finding a hidden cavern, depositing there the chest, sealing the entrance with stones, with mud, with the silence that an eternal secret demands. The letter continues. Some of those who accompanied Jeremiah returned later to mark the way, but they could not find it. When Jeremiah learned of this, he reproached them, saying that that place would remain unknown until God gathered his people again and showed his mercy. Then the Lord will manifest these things, and the glory of the Lord and the cloud will appear, as it manifested in the times of Moses. This tradition is cited by the Jewish historian Flavius Josephus in his Antiquities of the Jews, Book 10. It is cited by the rabbinic tradition in the Mishnah Yoma 5:2, and it is cited by the Christian historian Eusebius of Caesarea in the 4th century in his work Preparatio Evangelica. Is this true? It is an ancient and respected tradition, sustained by multiple independent sources. But beyond the exact geographical details, there is something of this tradition that cannot be ignored, and that is that the ancient Jewish tradition, the pre-Christian one, the one that was transmitted orally from before the birth of Jesus, sustained something very specific about the ark. It sustained that it had not been captured. It sustained that it had not been destroyed. It sustained that it had been hidden. And it sustained that it would reappear at a determined moment. When God fulfilled the promise made to the people, that phrase, "Save it, we are going to come back to it," third blow. And this is where almost all Christians pass by without noticing anything. Year 586 before Christ. Month of Av according to the Hebrew calendar, August in the solar calendar. Nebuchadnezzar enters Jerusalem after a siege that had lasted 2.5 years. The city was reduced to a shadow of itself. The famine had been so brutal that the chronicles record the same horror that 100 years later would be repeated with Titus. Mothers devouring their children, men killing each other for a handful of flour. The Babylonian commander Nebuzaradan enters the temple. He burns the sanctuary, he burns the palaces, he demolishes the walls, and he takes almost the entire population to Babylon. And the Babylonian scribes obsessively document everything. They were maniacs of record-keeping. The entire Babylonian economy operated with clay tablets and professional scribes who catalogued down to the last copper cup. In the cuneiform archives found in Babylon, we have immense lists of the objects sacked from Jerusalem. The Babylonian chronicle, known as ABC 5, discovered at the end of the 19th century and published by the Assyriologist Donald Wiseman, lists in detail the bronze objects, the gold containers, the sacred utensils that were taken to the Temple of Marduk in Babylon. The biblical listing confirms it. In 2 Kings 25, in Jeremiah 52, there appear the two bronze columns, Jachin and Boaz, which were at the entrance of the temple and which measured more than 8 meters each. The basins, the bronze chariots with their wheels, the cauldrons, the braziers, the sacrificial knives, the tongs, the cups of gold and silver, the lampstands, everything. But there is something that is missing. The Ark of the Covenant does not appear. It is not on the Babylonian list. It is not on the biblical list. It is not mentioned by Jeremiah when he inventories everything they took, and the silence is deafening. If the Babylonians had captured it, they would have listed it. It was the most valuable object in the temple. It was the central piece. It was the very presence of the God of Israel, enclosed in a chest whose lid and cherubim were of solid pure gold. Just the weight of the gold would have made the ark one of the most expensive objects of the spoils. They did not capture it because it was no longer there. And then come the prophets of the exile. And here is where the true reason begins to come to light. If this is shaking you, give it a like now. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, send them the video. These things are not taught in any average pulpit. Daniel is in Babylon. He has visions. One of them, in chapter 7, shows him the Ancient of Days seated on a throne. Daniel describes the scene with a detail that many do not catch. He is describing the mercy seat. He is describing the space between the cherubim. But it is no longer in a chest. It is in heaven. The throne of God is no longer in the earthly Holy of Holies. It is in another place. Ezekiel, a priest who understood perfectly the ritual of the temple, has a devastating vision. He narrates it in chapters 8 to 11 of his book. He is at his house in the Babylonian exile beside the river Chebar, sitting, surrounded by the elders of Judah. And suddenly, according to chapter 8 verse 1, the hand of Yahweh descends upon him. A figure of fire grabs him by a lock of his hair and elevates him between heaven and earth, and in visions of God takes him to Jerusalem, to the temple. And there Ezekiel sees things that destroy him inside. He sees 70 elders of Israel burning incense to idols in a secret room of the temple. He sees women weeping for the pagan god Tammuz at the entrance of the sanctuary. He sees 25 men with their backs to the temple, bowing toward the east, worshipping the rising sun. And then, with a broken heart, he sees the glory of Yahweh, the glory that dwelt over the ark, the glory that filled the temple since Solomon, and the glory begins to move. First it rises from upon the cherubim of the ark, then it moves to the threshold of the temple, then to the eastern side, then over the Mount of Olives, opposite the city, and from there it ascends, and it leaves. Ezekiel is describing the physical abandonment of the temple by the glory of Yahweh. Before the Babylonians arrived, before the city fell, Yahweh had already left, And then the ark was left empty, not of the tablets. That had already happened centuries before, according to Hebrews 9:4, where what was inside is mentioned, but the context suggests that in the second temple it was no longer complete. The ark was left empty in another deeper sense. The presence that had made it sacred had gone, and Yahweh himself had announced it through Jeremiah. Let us go to the text I promised at the beginning. Jeremiah chapter 3, verses 16 and 17. I'm going to read the phrase calmly because it is probably one of the most underestimated verses in all the Bible. First, the context. We are at the end of the reign of Josiah or the beginning of that of Jehoiakim. Solomon's temple is still standing. The ark is still inside. The sacrificial system still functions at full capacity. The priests offer incense, the Levites sing, the pilgrims go up 3 times a year, and Jeremiah, sitting perhaps in the courtyard of the temple or walking through the streets, receives a word that goes against everything any Jew of his era could imagine. Yahweh is speaking through the mouth of the prophet. He is describing a future, and he says like this: "In those days, when they multiply and increase in the land, they will no longer say the ark of the covenant of Yahweh. It will not come to mind. They will not remember it. They will not miss it, nor will another be made. In that time they will call Jerusalem the throne of Yahweh." Did you catch what you just heard? Yahweh. The same Yahweh who ordered the ark built in Exodus 25. The same one who filled the mercy seat with his glory in Leviticus 9. The same one who killed Uzzah for touching it in 2 Samuel 6. The same one who humiliated Dagon for capturing it in 1 Samuel 5. That Yahweh is saying through the mouth of Jeremiah that there is going to come a moment when the ark is not going to matter, that no one is going to look for it, that no one is going to miss it, that not even another one is going to be made, and that in its place, all of Jerusalem is going to be called the throne of Yahweh. This is not a casual comment. This is the Bible announcing its own transition. Yahweh was warning almost 600 years before the birth of Jesus that the ark was going to leave the center, that the chest was going to be replaced, that the presence of God was going to change residence. And the English biblical commentator F. Bruce, in his commentary on Hebrews, observed that this prophecy of Jeremiah is probably one of the most radical texts of the Old Testament, because Yahweh is not saying merely that the ark is going to disappear. He is saying that it will no longer be necessary. He is changing the very center of worship. But replaced by what? Here, almost all readers fall short, because the answer is not complete in Jeremiah 3. It is distributed in different parts of the New Testament, and when you put it together, your head explodes. Let us go to John chapter 1, verse 14. The Greek phrase is famous, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us." But the verb that John uses for dwelt is not the common verb to live or to reside. It is not oikeo, it is not meno, it is a very rare verb. It is the verb eskenosen, and the root of that verb is skene, which means tent, tabernacle. The New Testament Greek specialist Daniel Wallace, in his grammar Greek Grammar Beyond the Basics, points out that John is deliberately using terminology of the desert tabernacle. He is activating a Semitic memory. He is connecting 2 texts across 1,500 years. What John is saying in original Greek is that the Word, the eternal Word that was with God, that Word became flesh and tabernacled among us. He pitched his tent. The tent where the glory once dwelt over the ark was now a human body. The presence that rested between the cherubim now walked through the dusty streets of Galilee. He ate fish on the seashore. He wept at the tomb of Lazarus. He touched lepers. He blessed children. He bled nails. The ark had been the physical address of Yahweh on earth. Jesus was that address walking. And then the details begin to align in a way that is almost impossible to believe if you have not seen it before. Here goes something that passes under the radar of most Christians, but when you see it, you cannot ignore it. The letter to the Hebrews, chapter 9, is speaking about the earthly temple and the heavenly temple, about the ark and its fulfillment. And it says something. In verse 4, it describes the ark, its content and its cherubim. And in verse 5, it writes this phrase almost with disinterest, "Of these things we cannot now speak in detail." But afterward, in verses 11 and 12, it drops the bomb. "But Christ being already come, high priest of the good things to come, by the more ample and more perfect tabernacle not made with hands, not by the blood of goats nor of calves, but by his own blood. He entered once for all into the Holy of Holies, having obtained eternal redemption." This text is absolutely devastating in its implication. It is saying that the earthly ark was a shadow, a representation, that the true Holy of Holies is in heaven, and that Christ with his own blood entered there once for all. The earthly ark was no longer necessary because the reality to which it pointed had already arrived. That is exactly what Jeremiah had announced, that no one was going to miss it, that not even another would be made, because when Yahweh himself becomes flesh and enters the true Holy of Holies with his own blood, who is going to remember the chest? But here, there is a detail that is even stronger, and it is something that probably they never taught you. There is an event recorded in the 4 Gospels that is the physical, visual and architectural confirmation that the ark was no longer necessary, and almost no one connects it. Matthew 27:51, Mark 15:38, Luke 23:45. 3 Gospels, 3 independent testimonies, all recording the same thing. In the exact moment when Jesus dies on the cross, something occurs in the temple. Something that the priests who were officiating the sacrifices at that moment saw with their own eyes. The hour was the 9th, according to the Gospels, equivalent to 3 in the afternoon. It is the exact hour of the evening sacrifice, the Tamid, where a lamb was offered on the bronze altar while the priests in the holy place presented incense. The veil of the temple was torn in 2, from top to bottom. That veil was the one that separated the holy place from the Holy of Holies. It was a monstrous curtain. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus describes the veil of the Second Temple in his work, The Antiquities of the Jews, Book 3, Chapter 7, as a cloth woven in 4 colors that represented the 4 elements: white linen for the earth, purple for the sea, blue hyacinth for the air, crimson for the fire. It had cherubim embroidered on it, just like the first veil of the tabernacle in the desert, and according to the Mishnah in the tractate Shekalim 8 verse 5, that veil had the thickness of a palm, around 10 centimeters, and was so heavy that 300 priests were needed to submerge it when it had to be ritually purified. Some scholars consider the figures exaggerated, but the rabbinic source is direct and specific. And it tore. From top to bottom, not from bottom to top. That is geometrically impossible for a human hand. The priests who were at that moment offering the evening incense saw what no priest had seen since Solomon. They saw through the tearing the interior of the Holy of Holies. They saw the most sacred room of Judaism. They saw the bare stone where the ark once stood. And they understood in that instant that something cosmic had just happened. Why did it tear? Because the entire system was over, because there was no longer a need for a veil that covered an empty chest in a room abandoned by the glory, because the true path to the Holy of Holies had just opened on the cross. Hebrews 10:19 and 20 says it like this: "We have boldness to enter the Holy of Holies by the blood of Jesus Christ, by the new and living way that he opened for us through the veil, that is, his flesh." The veil was his flesh. The blood that opened the way was his blood. The Holy of Holies was relocated. It was no longer a room with a golden chest. It was heaven itself, and the entrance was Christ. If you have just connected Jeremiah 3 with Hebrews 9 for the first time in your life, give the video a like. It is the way more people can come to these things. But there is a piece missing, and here is where the puzzle is completed. Let us go to the book of Revelation, chapter 11, verse 19. It is one of the strangest verses in all of Revelation, and the immense majority of readers passes over it without understanding what they are reading. John, exiled on the island of Patmos around the year 95 after Christ, is having a vision. He is an old man. He is almost 90 years old. He is the last of the 12 apostles. All the others are already dead. Peter crucified upside down in Rome. Paul beheaded outside the wall. Andrew crucified in X in Patras. Thomas pierced by a spear in India. And John exiled on a rocky island by the Emperor Domitian for preaching Christ. In that exile, John is worshipping on a Sunday, and the powerful voice like a trumpet behind him elevates him, and the apocalypse begins, the revelation. And in chapter 11, John describes what he sees. And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and the ark of his covenant was seen in the temple. And there were lightnings, voices, thunders, an earthquake, and great hail. It appeared. The ark appeared. Not in a cave on Mount Nebo, not under the Temple Mount, not in Ethiopia as a tradition of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church maintains, which places it in Aksum, not in Karnak with Shishak, not in Babylon with Nebuchadnezzar, in heaven. What Jeremiah had announced is fulfilled here. The true ark, the heavenly ark of which the earthly one was barely the shadow, is visible. And what is being revealed in Revelation is the total fulfillment of the promise that Yahweh made to the people. The presence of God among his people, but no longer in a chest, but in a lamb, in the glorified Christ, in the center of the throne. There is something more. And this closes the circle in an almost cinematographic way. Do you remember the phrase from 2 Maccabees, that letter that spoke of Jeremiah hiding the ark on Mount Nebo, and which said that the hiding place would remain sealed until Yahweh restored his people? That then the cloud and the glory would appear again, as in the times of Moses. When did the people of God gather again? When the Messiah called Peter, John, Matthew, Martha, Mary, Paul. When the disciples preached and thousands came. When the people of God was redefined not by Jewish blood alone, but by faith in the Messiah. When did the glory of the Lord and the cloud appear? On the Mount of the Transfiguration. Matthew 17, verses 1 to 8. The scene is chillingly parallel to Sinai. Jesus goes up to a high mountain. He takes with him 3 witnesses, Peter, James, and John. Just as Moses had gone up to Sinai with Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, just as 3 witnesses were required by the law to validate an extraordinary event. And then, on the summit of the mountain, according to the text, Jesus is transfigured before them. The Greek word is metamorpho, the same root that gives metamorphosis. His form changes, his face shines like the sun, his garments become white as the light. The exact word that Matthew uses, leukos, designates a whiteness that is not of this world. Mark describes it in his Gospel, chapter 9, verse 3, with an incredible phrase, resplendent, white as the snow, so much that no launderer on earth could make them so white. And there appear Moses and Elijah talking with him. Moses, the prophet of the law, Elijah, the prophet of the prophets, the 2 greater representatives of the Old Covenant. And the 2 are conversing with Jesus about, according to Luke 9, verse 31, his departure that was going to be fulfilled in Jerusalem. The Greek word there is exodon, his exodus, his departure. Peter, overwhelmed, lets out a phrase that shows how deeply connected all this was in his mind with the Old Testament. Master, it is good that we stay here. Let us make 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Tabernacles, tents, skene in Greek. The same word that John had used in his prologue. The same structure of the desert. Peter, without fully understanding, intuited that the presence of Yahweh was there, just as in the desert. And while Peter was still speaking, a luminous cloud covered them. And from the cloud, A voice said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." That cloud, that same cloud that had filled the tabernacle in the desert, that had rested over the ark, that had filled Solomon's temple, that had risen and gone in the vision of Ezekiel, that cloud had returned. But now it rested upon Jesus. Fourth and final blow. Let us go to the closing. When the Romans entered the Holy of Holies in the year 70 of our era and found nothing, that void was not a failure. It was a declaration. It was Yahweh saying, "I am no longer there." And the place where he was double. A heavenly temple where Christ had entered with his own blood, and a new temple, a temple that Paul would describe in 1 Corinthians 3:16 with words that have to stop you if you take them seriously. Do you not know that you are temple of God and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? The ark was not replaced by another chest. It was replaced by people. Men and women in whom the Holy Spirit dwells, just as the glory dwelt over the mercy seat between the cherubim. That is why Peter writes in his first letter, chapter 2, that we are living stones being built up as a spiritual house. The true reason why the ark disappeared before Jesus was not accidental. It was not a Babylonian sacking that the scribe forgot to document. It was not priestly negligence. It was not a rapacious Pharaoh. It was a deliberate act of Yahweh, announced by Jeremiah 6 centuries before, executed in 3 blows that marked 3 stages, and consummated on the day Christ was born in a manger in Bethlehem. Because from that day, the chest stopped being necessary. The presence that rested between the cherubim began to walk. The glory that filled the Holy of Holies began to breathe. The voice that spoke to Moses from the mercy seat began to teach on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. And when that voice died on a cross and rose on the 3rd day, the veil was torn, the earthly temple was left empty, and the glory was definitively transferred, first to heaven, where Revelation 11 tells us that the true temple and the true ark are, and later by the Holy Spirit to the hearts of every believer who opens the pages of the Bible and listens to the voice that continues speaking. If this touched something inside you, give the video a like now. If you are part of this family, you already know that the like out of trust is what keeps this channel reaching more people. And if you just arrived, you still do not have to do anything. Wait, the last thing has not yet arrived. There is a story that illustrates this in a way that almost no one catches. Imagine a woman. She is 50-something years old, diagnosed with a serious illness. She is in a hospital room, with the fluorescent light flickering, the smell of disinfectant embedded in her clothes, the noise of a machine counting heartbeats. She is alone. All her life she went to the temple. All her life she fulfilled rites. All her life she sought the presence of God in specific places, on specific Sundays, in specific moments of the worship service, in front of the altar, in the guided prayer, in the liturgy. And now she is alone in a room with white walls, without choir, without priest, without organ, without visible symbols, without a golden chest to look at. And she opens her mouth, and she whispers the name of Jesus, and she feels something she had not felt in 40 years of church. She feels that he is there, in that room, with her, not behind a veil, not in a distant building, not in a golden room reserved for a special priest. There, with her, in her chest, in her breathing, in her tears. That, exactly that, is what it means that the ark was withdrawn before Jesus. It means that the presence of God is no longer limited to an object, to a place, to a priest, to a protocol. It means that the Holy Spirit, who arrived at Pentecost 50 days after the resurrection, makes his tabernacle in common and ordinary human bodies. Paul says it with words that you have to let enter your chest. Romans 8 verse 9, "If anyone does not have the Spirit of Christ, he is not of him. and Romans 8 verse 11. If the Spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ Jesus from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies through his Spirit who dwells in you. Dwells, inhabits, has his tent, skene, the same Greek root. The ark was not lost. The ark fulfilled its mission. It was a shadow that pointed to a body. And when the body appeared, the shadow stopped being necessary. That is why Jeremiah says that no one would miss it. Because when you have Christ, what do you want a chest for? And when you have the Holy Spirit inside you, why would you look for a golden room on a hill in Jerusalem? The glory that was there is here, in this precise moment, in this precise place, in whoever has received it. That is the true reason.